In the United States, public school funding is primarily derived from local property taxes, which creates a system where wealthier communities with higher property values can provide more resources for their schools than poorer communities. This structure has led to an increasingly inequitable education system where the quality of education a child receives is highly dependent on the wealth of their neighborhood. According to the U.S. Department of Education, over 90% of K-12 education funding in the U.S. comes from state and local sources, with about 45% directly sourced from local property taxes. This reliance on local property wealth means that affluent areas can offer better funded schools, while low-income areas struggle with underfunded schools and fewer educational resources. The disparities in school funding and resources, the differences in funding between wealthy and impoverished school districts are stark. The Education Law Center's report, Making the Grade 2023, highlights that, on average, the highest poverty school districts receive about $1,000 less per student than the lowest poverty districts. In states like Illinois and Pennsylvania, the disparity is even more extreme, with high poverty districts receiving $3,000 less per student compared to affluent districts. Over a child's K-12 education, this discrepancy can add up to tens of thousands of dollars in lost funding, affecting the quality of education and opportunities available to students in low-income areas. The impacts of this funding gap are profound. Wealthier schools can afford better facilities, newer technology, more extracurricular programs, and higher teacher salaries. According to the National Education Association, NEA, teacher salaries in affluent districts are 15 to 20% higher on average than in poorer districts. This difference not only attracts more qualified teachers to wealthier districts, but also increases teacher retention, creating a stable and experienced teaching force that directly benefits students. In contrast, underfunded schools often struggle to hire and retain teachers, leading to higher teacher turnover and larger class sizes. The NEA also found that in high-poverty schools, teacher turnover rates are 50% higher than in low-poverty schools, which disrupts students' learning and lowers academic outcomes. The cycle of poverty and limited social mobility. The consequences of an inequitable education system extend beyond the classroom. Education is one of the most significant factors influencing upward social mobility, yet students in underfunded schools are at a disadvantage before they even begin. Studies have shown that students from lower-income families are more likely to attend schools with fewer resources, which impacts their chances of academic success, college enrollment, and career opportunities. A 2022 study by the Economic Policy Institute found that only 60% of students from low-income families graduate high school compared to 90% of students from high-income families. This graduation gap perpetuates the cycle of poverty, as those without a high school diploma face significant challenges in the job market and are more likely to earn low wages throughout their lives. The barriers to higher education for low-income students are also significant. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, NCES, students from wealthier backgrounds are 4 times more likely to enroll in college than students from low-income backgrounds. The financial limitations of low-income students, compounded by limited college counseling and fewer advanced placement (AP) courses in underfunded schools, hinder their ability to compete for college admissions and scholarships. As a result, students from low-income areas are less likely to obtain higher education credentials, which are increasingly essential in today's job market. The lack of access to higher education further traps these students in low-paying jobs, reinforcing economic inequality and reducing social mobility. Broader social and economic implications of education inequality. The disparities in educational opportunities not only impact individual students, but also have far-reaching social and economic consequences. Inadequate education funding in low-income areas has been linked to higher rates of unemployment, crime, and health issues. Research from the American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, shows that students who attend poorly funded schools are more likely to experience chronic stress, which can have negative effects on their cognitive development and mental health. Additionally, poorly funded schools often lack access to mental health resources, counselors, and extracurricular activities that contribute to students' overall well-being. Education inequality also impacts the economy on a macro scale. The McKinsey Global Institute estimates that the US could add up to $1 trillion to its GDP annually by closing the educational attainment gap between high and low-income students. A more educated workforce contributes to economic growth by enhancing productivity, driving innovation, and reducing reliance on social welfare programs. Yet the current system, which underfunds schools in low-income communities, limits the potential of millions of students and, consequently, the nation's economic progress. Furthermore, education disparities weaken the United States' position in global competitiveness. According to the Programme for International Student Assessment, PISA, US students perform below average in math and science, compared to students in countries with more equitable education systems such as Finland, Singapore, and Canada. These countries invest heavily in education and prioritize equal access, resulting in higher academic achievement and a more skilled workforce. In contrast, the US education system's inequality not only limits social mobility for its citizens, but also hinders the country's ability to compete in a global economy where innovation and technical skills are paramount. Academic insights on educational inequality. Academic research consistently shows that the structure of school funding in the US is a major contributor to persistent inequality. A study published in the American Educational Research Journal found that students in underfunded districts are far more likely to drop out of high school and less likely to achieve literacy and numeracy levels comparable to their peers in well-funded districts. The study also found that the achievement gap in standardized testing between students from low and high-income districts has grown by nearly 40% since the 1970s, illustrating that current funding mechanisms have failed to address this widening disparity. The research further indicates that schools in low-income areas are more likely to face overcrowding, lack of supplies, and outdated materials. In California, for example, a report by the Public Policy Institute of California found that students in low-income districts are twice as likely to attend overcrowded schools compared to students in affluent districts. This lack of adequate facilities and resources directly impacts students' ability to learn effectively, putting them at an educational disadvantage from an early age. These challenges underscore the urgent need to reform how public education is funded to ensure that all students have equal access to quality education. Personal reflections and policy recommendations. Given the overwhelming evidence of the harm caused by reliance on local property taxes for school funding, it is clear that reform is necessary. One potential solution is to increase the role of federal and state governments in school funding, providing more substantial support for schools in lower-income areas. States like New Jersey and Massachusetts have implemented school funding formulas that allocate additional resources to districts with higher poverty rates, helping to reduce the funding gap between rich and poor districts. These models could serve as examples for other states, illustrating that equitable funding can improve educational outcomes. Furthermore, the US could look to countries with more equitable systems, such as Finland, where education funding is largely centralized, and all schools receive comparable resources regardless of location. In Finland, all students have access to high-quality teachers, curricula, and facilities, leading to consistently high performance on international assessments. While the US system is more decentralized, adopting a more centralized approach to funding could reduce the extreme disparities currently seen between American school districts. The American education system's reliance on local funding deepens the divide between wealth and poverty, limiting opportunities for millions of students and stifling social mobility. This funding structure not only perpetuates poverty, but also threatens the country's economic and competitive future. To address these challenges, the US must rethink its approach to education funding, recognizing that equal access to quality education is essential for a fair and prosperous society. By adopting more equitable funding practices, the US can create a stronger foundation for future generations, fostering a society where success is determined by talent and hard work rather than zip code.
Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. It's one of the best ways to help more people see this content. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment below and join the conversation about today's topic. Your engagement and support mean everything to me, and make it possible for me to create more impactful content that aims to bring the world closer together. If you'd like to take it a step further, you can support the channel directly through the link in the description. Every bit of support helps this community grow and fuels the mission to make a difference. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey.